Hate crime in Britain is going up. British police launched an investigation after citizens received letters asking them to carry out attacks on Muslims. The letters promote Punish a Muslim Day and have been received across the country, including in Yorkshire, London and Birmingham. It reflects the increasing Islamophobia in the UK, with regular scare stories about Muslims in the media and a sense that anti-Muslim hatred is becoming more socially acceptable. This is helping to increase attacks on Muslims and drive up the general violence against the Muslim community. Attacks against mosques, physical abuse against Muslims, anti-Muslim graffiti at a university, a rise in verbal abuse and hate mail, Islamophobia in schools and online abuse against Muslims through social media all suggest the United Kingdom is a place where hate is allowed to grow and where hateful commentary can be publicly expressed. The abuse has become so targeted that a number of women are resorting to modifying their appearance, wearing caps in place of headscarves to prevent being attacked. A Bradford councillor, who was among the recipients of the hate letter, said that when he opened it and saw the content, he was horrified. I think it has been sent out by a group with the intent of alarming people and to stir up racial hatred, he told the Telegraph newspaper. My main concern is that it could get into the hands of other disaffected people in Bradford who just need that push to act. The letters pledged rewards for those who do violent acts against Muslims, ranging from verbal abuse of them to burning or bombing mosques. In the letters, there is a points-based scoring system, rising from 25 points for pulling the headscarf off a Muslim woman to 2,500 if you nuke Mecca. Why does the mainstream media underreport Muslim protests against terrorism? And why do women face more hate crimes than men? Simple questions with important answers. Let's think about this. It's claimed that Britain has an acceptance of anti-Muslim rhetoric that would not be tolerated against other minorities. Why is this the case? We put that to the public here in London. This is what we learned.
I think why the general public is not aware of that because the media, the mainstream media is being controlled by people who are anti-Islamic. So that is, I believe that is the reason behind that.
I think it's because of what's been going on in the news and what's being publicized and stuff like that, that I think that with every new group coming to the area, you're going to kind of have that initial kind of feelings of tension and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I think you see here going on.
Well, I think it's all to do with the ISIS and the idea of how terrorism has been assigned to Muslims. And based on those sort of concepts and elements, people tend to find it easier to be Islamophobia and be anti-Muslim as opposed to the other religions.
Perhaps yes, because of ISIS and everything it has claimed and everything, but it's sad actually because it's just not true.
I don't think that's true, no. I think it's very important that some degree of freedom of speech is borderline on more aggressive right-wing elements. But on the other hand, when it becomes violence of the kind that's demonstrated by the right, then it is something we need to watch. And I think it sets up conflict and makes matters worse.
I don't think the issue is as simple as this, and I do think that it is a lot more complicated than that. I agree that the government has been slow in responding to Islamophobia problem. However, I do think that we should take the lead on challenging the government, challenging the political bodies, going to the House of Parliament, lobbying, talking to the politicians, talking to the people of power, talking to the people who are responsible for addressing these things, because I think we have a responsibility to defend ourselves and also to make it clear that it's not acceptable that these Islamophobic comments and actions are allowed to take place.
In relation to the rhetoric which in a way subjugates Muslims and the way in which they've been portrayed by society and even criticised by certain sections of society, I would say this is because of Britain's history, the way in which it has interacted with predominantly Muslim countries, many of which have formerly been colonies of Britain, and as a way to justify treating people in this manner, they've had to be portrayed as inferior as a way to actually validate Britain's role in interfering in these countries, politically, socially, culturally, military in many cases as well. So they've had to use certain rhetoric which has been used historically and still filters into modern day society because it has been the foundations of British imperialism, because the British economy has historically been based upon the exploitation of certain countries, and this still has an effect on social discourse today. I couldn't comment on whether Muslims are the most polarised social group within British society, but they are nonetheless definitely one of the most. And you can see the way in which Muslims are even portrayed as subhuman in regards to the migrant crisis, the way in which it has become normalised for people to be treated in such an inhumane manner, and even left to drown in the sea in the majority of cases. So I would say it's linked to British society and British history.
Letters encouraging recipients to take part in Punish a Muslim Day have apparently been sent to addresses across the country. What does the public think of this?
That is something really bad, to be honest. I wouldn't have thought that in this country such letters would be sent out, especially in London, as it's a multicultural and multi-religion city. But still, I think it's just like a very small minority that are trying to terrify others, and that is the same thing that ISIS is doing. They send in messages to everyone out there, just like fear us. But the correct position is not to fear and not be scared from these messages, because that is what they are trying to get to. They're trying to make everyone scared, and together, and hopefully, if we are we think reasonably and rationally, will not be scared from these messages.
I don't agree with that at all. I think that one of the things I've learned, one of the greatest things about London especially, is that it's a very culturally diverse city. And I think as soon as you start to kind of penalize certain groups for just different reasons, I think you lose that cultural diversity that's really made that to be London's identity.
That's horrible. I mean, why do we all fight for human rights and things like that if we're just gonna do horrible things like that? Especially, I guess they're anonymous, aren't they, the letters? It's just way too easy to hit on people like that. It's not because they're Muslim, it's the religion. It's not, they haven't done anything bad. And, you know, Muslim doesn't mean you're a terrorist. Please stop.
Well, I mean, I think it's a criminal position completely. I think people should be arrested and taken into custody who do it.
I think it's, you say ridiculous. There's no one should encourage that kind of behavior at all.
I have received these letters via WhatsApp, and I believe that the issue is being given much more of a size than it deserves. I have spoken to the police about it, and their advice was that people should remain calm but vigilant. I do think that this is a serious matter and needs to be addressed, and I am assured that it will be addressed. I am assured through communication with some police officers and some people that there will be more presence in the streets, and more assurance will be given to the Muslim community. There will be some events taking place at mosques and at faith organizations, faith communities in the streets. However, at the same time, I think the people who send these letters, they want to create instability, and they want to create a community divide and conflict. And we should respond to that by remaining calm and being vigilant and being careful and making complaints and addressing that through the police and the authorities that are responsible for this.
I believe it is a very stupid act to engage in. I would say events of this nature usually come about when people do not have the resources and even the knowledge to actually articulate their political, social and economic problems. So they actually propel or superimpose those problems upon another marginalised social group as a way to blame them in like an act of catharsis, as a way to try and pinpoint that blame and that anger on a specific social group, and especially a social group which has already been subjugated, marginalised and polarised by society. In actuality, many of the people that would have sent these letters to leading British politicians probably have more in common with the actual Muslim man or woman down the road than they do with the politicians who've created society and which has actually subjugated people such as them. If you were aware of British history and the current state of world affairs, you would not send a letter to say to punish Muslims, because you'd be well aware that Muslims are already being punished every single day. The amount of Muslims drowning in the sea, the sort of economic policies imposed upon predominantly Muslim countries, and sanctions and so on and so forth, and military intervention. So Muslims are already being punished. So why would you need to send a letter as a way to further accentuate an already ongoing issue?
Reporters claim those committing anti-Muslim incidents often refer to mainstream debate on immigration and terrorism, plus other Islamophobic and dehumanising language to abuse their victims. How does the public feel about this?
Between themselves, they don't really have any excuse, but they always blame it that they love their country and they don't want it to be controlled by Sharia law or anything else. But in fact, that is not true at all. They don't really have any excuse in reality. So all they're doing is just trying to make people hate Muslims because they do, so they can feel better for themselves.
Yeah, I think that the media paints a picture, and it can be good or bad, but I think you actually kind of have to research and put in your own time to understand. It's very, very hard from just hearing things from a third-party source. I think you kind of have to get more involved in and kind of have and build those relationships and talk and have those different discussions to help.
If there was a process or there was a campaign to raise people's awareness about the reality versus the ideology and the propaganda that gets spread out by different people on different sides of the continent.
I don't think so, no. The media is usually quite open, and democracy, freedom of speech are things that are against anti-Muslim things. So no.
I think the media plays a part in most things that have any spread in terms of public issues. I think that the media have no doubt played some part in it. I don't know whether Facebook's involved in that, but it is obviously an instrument that is used dangerously. So I think the media needs regulation, yes, I do.
I think the way the media covers such unfortunate incidents, it hasn't helped and has had a negative impact on the escalation of hate crime and the escalation of incidents that would be described as Islamophobic. And I do think that the media coverage of unfortunate, sad incidents that involved Muslims had been exaggerated to a point that it made it look like that all Muslims have been involved in these incidents, when it is the fact that only a small number of people that we don't agree with have been involved in these incidents.
Yes, definitely. I believe the media plays a part in it, because firstly you have to remember that the media is a business. It's dependent on profit. So it's not an industry which is founded upon social justice and morals and values. Although there is certain media companies which would deviate from this norm, and there would be certain media institutions that do try and create a more informed and educated society, many of the newspapers and media outlets actually benefit from maintaining this very unjust social status quo. And because the media is concentrated among a wealthy, privileged few, the majority of which have benefited off the history of British imperialism, colonialism, etc., it would be in the interest of newspaper proprietors and those who fund the media to actually perpetuate these ideologies. And furthermore, it's the simplification of the current situation. What happens with the media and with other people who engage in this sort of discourse, you take the worst aspects of a certain culture or a certain social group and then use those actions and use those events as a way to treat all of the people from that social group in the same manner, as if to say that because certain Muslims have adopted an extreme version of Islam and undertaken abhorrent terrorist acts means that you can then view all Muslims in the same way, which is of course a very absurd ideology to even promote in the first place.
69% of those committing hate crimes are white men. Street-level anti-Muslim crimes rose by 47% in 2016 versus the year before. There was also a 475% increase in the number of anti-Muslim incidents in the week following the 2016 European Union referendum. There were 12 incidents in the 7 days starting on the 17th of June, rising to 69 incidents in the week beginning the 24th of June 2016. 56% of victims of hate crime are Muslim women. Thousands of Muslims worldwide protest and condemn terrorist groups and terror attacks after every incident. Why does the mainstream media fail to report these protests? We asked the public.
It's obvious that they just have that hatred against Muslims, nothing at all. I can't see any other reason.
In order to fully understand the situation, I think you can decrease some of the kind of ill will by publicizing, by creating more events and spreading more information on what they're doing.
Well, I suppose media wants to present the things that firstly benefit them and secondly would kind of gain them some sort of reputation and attentions from their citizens. So in a way, that is the reality that media should follow what is happening as opposed to filter what needs to be said to benefit them as opposed to benefit the citizens.
I guess because it's stuff that's more exceptional and people go, wow, when they see a terror attack, whereas if it's just daily life stuff, they aren't as concerned and as interested, which they should be. But I guess that's one of the big flaw of media and nowadays in the 21st century.
Well, I think the media is actually biased by sort of ethnocentricities, and that's simply part of it. The media itself is uncontrolled, and it's not necessarily representing justice on any one particular issue, but will actually propagate what sells. So there you have an obvious case of populism.
It is actually unfortunate that the media doesn't focus on the positive side of things, because people take it for granted that this is what should happen, that people should protest and should reject such atrocities and such bad behavior. However, I do think they need to focus on the positives as well, because basically it's about promoting community cohesion. It's about promoting that we need to live together peacefully and work together, cooperate, and also engage in dialogue and trying to understand each other's point of views and stories and the suffering of the others. And at the same time, we need to also work on better relationships between the communities to ensure that everybody's safety is ensured and that everyone feels safe and at peace.
I think this goes back to the previous question, in that the media is an industry which is driven by profit, and the way in which the media is currently progressing, it's becoming harder for media companies to operate in the financial markets. Many are having to make job cuts and to roll back their overheads as a way to save as much money as possible. Events such as Muslims protesting, rightly so, the acts of certain people of their social group, is not something which sells newspapers, it would seem, and is not something which attracts people via the various social media feeds which newspapers use, because news has become simplified and newspapers are literally battling with one another for online attention spans. And because of this, it is much more in the financial interests of media outlets to create listicles, very simplified news stories which are going to attract a mass amount of viewers, such as you see all these sort of stories all the time, such as 11 ways to increase your exercise routine. Very simplified news stories which can easily be shared across social media platforms. And then lastly, the media is socially homogenous. Who ends up in the media? Usually those from privileged backgrounds, not religious minorities. And this also has an effect as to who is aware that these incidents are even happening in the first place.
Women who are more likely to be attacked than men are resorting to wearing caps instead of headscarves to try to prevent these attacks. Why are women more likely to face hate crimes? We put that to the public here in London.
Well, I think because I hate to say that, but most people believe that women are more vulnerable. They can't really protect themselves, especially that Muslim women, they dress more as modest, so they are an easier target.
I think that number one, that they're kind of just an easier target. But number two, I think they're the least kind of understood out of either Muslim men or Muslim women.
Well, I think again that goes back to ignorance, and that goes back to not being aware of what exactly Islam is and what Islam portrays and what Islam teaches to the men and women. But obviously women are easy to be targeted, and Muslim women tend to wear the clothes that men don't wear, and it kind of separates them a lot from the rest of the women or the females in the society, so they could be spotted from far away, they could be targeted easily than men.
Stereotypes, the idea that, I don't know, manly men are, are stronger than women, so women are an easy target, especially Muslim women, I think, because they're like heavily stereotyped. And they have the discrimination because they're a woman, and B, discrimination because they're Muslim. So it's an easy target, really.
I think when there is ferment concerning, a right-wing position or reaction of that kind, I think women are an easy target, yes, because they are culturally oppressed by that kind of regime, meaning, the spread of the regime rather than the diaspora of the right.
It is sad to hear this, because obviously we all know that Muslim women, the majority or most of them wear hijab, and that identify them to be Muslims. And at the same time, we know that women can be targeted because they are seen to be the weakest link, or they are seen to be the easiest target they can attack. And this is actually very serious, because obviously everybody has the freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and these women have the right to wear the way they feel comfortable and the way they think that is they're in their right to dress the way they want, and it's not right that they get attacked. And the British government should find a solution to make sure that they are protected and safeguarded.
I would say women are more likely to be attacked by hate crime because of the culture, domestic culture within Britain, and also world culture. Unfortunately, we do live in a world where women are still culturally and socially seen as inferior, although they're evidently not, and women are portrayed as inferior. Economically, they are subjugated. So we have been raised in a society where socially, it has been constructed that women are of less value than a man, which is evidently not the case. But because of this, I would say this can lead to an increase in hate crime towards people such as women, because during times of political, social and economic crises, it is usually the marginalised groups which actually get attacked for the shortfalls of those who actually command the real power. And it is much easier for those that have political and social frustrations to project those angers on a vulnerable person than it is to actually go and attack the people that are truly responsible for the problems which they're experiencing, because that takes a lot more time and resources.
Conservative Education Minister Michael Gove once claimed suicidal violence is integral to political Islam. It seems Britain has an acceptance of anti-Muslim rhetoric, even at the highest levels of government, that would not be tolerated against other minorities. And as we've heard, women are more likely to be attacked than men, perhaps because they wear such visibly Islamic clothing. There has always been prejudice in the United Kingdom, but reported hate crimes increased by 475% in the week after the European referendum. This suggests many saw the vote to leave the European Union as a green light to express their hateful views. It's unfortunate that the mainstream media provide the ammunition for those who use the printed and spoken words of that media to justify hate crimes, crimes which cause distress, injury, and even death.